Every character in the amazing world of Gumball was a reject. I don't mean that as a metaphor. I mean that literally. Before the show existed, before Gumball was a blue cat, before Darwin was a goldfish with legs, before Elmore was a town, the characters that would populate this world were sketches that had been rejected by advertising clients. Ben Bocquelet, the show's creator, worked at a London animation studio called Studio AKA, where he spent years pitching character designs for commercials. Most of them got turned down. A ghost made of paper, a balloon with feelings, a cactus girl, a cloud who cries, a robot who doesn't understand humans. One by one, clients said no. And instead of throwing those sketches away, Bocquelet kept them, all of them, filed away in a folder of failures that he carried with him when he walked into Cartoon Network Development Studio Europe in 2007. And when the studio asked everyone to pitch their own show ideas, Bocquelet took that folder of rejected characters that nobody wanted, and put them all in the same school. His original pitch was a show about rejected cartoons attending a remedial school, learning how to be funny. The executives said the concept was too sad, so he reworked it into a family sitcom. And that family sitcom became The Amazing World of Gumball, which premiered on Cartoon Network on May 3rd, 2011, and ran for 6 seasons and 240 episodes, earning multiple BAFTA Children's Awards, an International Emmy Kids Award, and a cult following that has only grown since the show ended in 2019. And here's the thing nobody talks about. That original concept, the rejected characters, never actually went away. It's embedded in the DNA of the show. It's in the animation. It's in the world building. It's in the lore. And it's in the deepest layer of the Gumball Iceberg, which is what we're exploring tonight. From the stuff every fan knows at the surface, Gumball's a cat, Darwin's a fish, Nicole could kill God, all the way down to things that even dedicated fans have never heard of. Hidden animation secrets, censored episodes, a dimension called the Void that literally eats characters the show considers mistakes, a villain who knows he's fictional, an unaired pilot with a completely different look, a Chinese knockoff that the show made an entire episode about, a movie that's been in development limbo for years, and the real identities of the Watterson family, who are all named after Bocquelet's actual relatives. So if you're watching this late at night, get comfortable. This is going to be a long one. And before we go any further, I'd just like to kindly ask you to subscribe. It's completely free, and it really helps us improve the videos. Alright, let's start at the top of the iceberg. The surface level. The stuff you know if you've watched even a handful of episodes. Gumball Watterson is a 12-year-old blue cat. His best friend and adopted brother is Darwin, a goldfish who sprouted legs and joined the family. Their younger sister Anais is the smartest person in the household. Their mother Nicole is a terrifyingly competent woman who holds the family together through sheer force of will. And their father Richard is a lovable idiot who once caused a blackout by plugging in too many appliances at the same time. They live in the fictional city of Elmore, which is populated by anthropomorphic animals, sentient objects, food items, ghosts, robots, and creatures that defy any category. The show is a comedy. It's frequently hilarious. The jokes come at a speed that rewards rewatching. And the animation, and this is the first layer where the iceberg starts going deeper than most people realize, is unlike anything else on television. The Amazing World of Gumball uses mixed media animation. That means it combines 2D traditional animation, 3D CGI, stop motion, puppetry, flash animation, and live action photography, sometimes in the same shot. The backgrounds are photographed real-world locations, primarily shot in and around London, which gives the fictional American suburb of Elmore this uncanny quality. The buildings are real, the trees are real, the sky is real, and then a blue cartoon cat walks across the frame, and your brain does this weird thing where it accepts it. Bocquelet has talked about this in interviews. He was influenced by Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and he wanted children to believe Elmore was a real place they could visit. He wanted the world to feel tangible. And I think that's one of the reasons the show has such a devoted fan base. It doesn't look like anything else. It can't look like anything else because the production process is so complex, involving studios in London, Germany, and Ireland, that replicating it would be an enormous undertaking. Studio Soy, based in Ludwigsburg, Germany, handled the CGI elements and compositing from the very first season, and their contribution is a huge part of why the show looks the way it does. Boulder Media in Ireland handled 2D animation work. The whole operation was genuinely international, produced by Cartoon Network Development Studio Europe, which was based in London. And the show was the very first full-length animated series that studio ever produced. And I love this detail. The characters are all animated in different styles because, in the logic of the show's world, they're all different kinds of beings. Gumball and his family are 2D animated. Penny Fitzgerald, his love interest, is 3D rendered after she breaks out of her shell. Banana Joe is a mix of 2D and paper cutout. Sussy is a live-action chin puppet, an actual human chin with googly eyes, filmed in live action and composited into the cartoon world. That's not a joke. There is a character on this show who is a real person's chin with eyes drawn on it, interacting with cartoon characters against real-world backgrounds, and somehow it works. That's the kind of creative insanity that defines Gumball, and it's one of the reasons the show won so many animation awards. Now let me go a layer deeper, because the character origins are their own section of the iceberg, and they're fascinating. Bacalé named the main characters after his own family. Nicole is named after his mother, who he's described in interviews as a kick-ass woman. Richard is named after his father, whom he's described as a giant man-child. Aeneas is named after his sister. Gumball represents Bacalé himself. That means the core family dynamic of the show. An overwhelmed but fiercely capable mother holding everything together, while the father acts like an oversized child and the kids cause chaos, is drawn directly from Bacalé's real life. And you can feel that authenticity in the writing. Nicole Watterson isn't just a strong female character stereotype. She's a specific person. She has rage. She has exhaustion. She has moments of genuine tenderness, followed by moments of terrifying violence. There's an episode, The Limit, Season 2, where Nicole is pushed past her breaking point in a supermarket, and the animation shifts to suggest she's become something almost demonic. It's played for comedy, but underneath the comedy is a very real portrait of what it looks like when a parent who does everything snaps. And that specificity, that rootedness in a real person, is what separates Gumball's characters from generic cartoon archetypes. The show premiered on May 3rd, 2011, in the United States. Cartoon Network UK had aired a sneak peek the day before, on May 2nd, with the episode The Mystery. The show was actually renewed for a second season before it even aired. In March 2011, 2 months before the premiere, Cartoon Network clearly believed in it. And the first season, while beloved by fans, is noticeably different from what came later. The animation is slightly rougher. The humor is broader. The characterization is still finding its footing. Gumball's voice actor in the first 2 seasons was Logan Grove, who was around 12 when recording began. By the middle of Season 3, both Gumball and Darwin's voice actors, Grove and Kwesi Boki, had gone through puberty, and the show had to address this. Rather than ignoring it, they made an episode about it. The Kids, the first episode of Season 3, which deals directly with the boys' voices changing and passes the roles to new actors. Bocalé talked about this in a squiggly interview, saying it was important to him to say goodbye to the original actors properly, rather than just silently replacing them. That attention to the emotional reality behind a practical production issue is very Gumball. And here's where we start descending into iceberg territory that most casual fans don't know about. The early reel. Before the show was greenlit for a full series, a test animation reel was produced to demonstrate the mixed media concept to Cartoon Network executives. This early reel features character designs that differ from the final show. Darwin looks noticeably different. Gumball's proportions are slightly off, and the overall aesthetic is rougher. The early reel has been seen by fans who've tracked it down, and some of the rejected designs from it can actually be spotted inside the show itself. In the Season 3 episode, The Void, when Gumball and Darwin enter the Void, a dimension that contains all the mistakes the world has ever made, Darwin's original CGI design from the early reel is visible, floating in the background. That's not an accident. That's the show winking at its own production history. The early reel design was a mistake, so the show put it in the dimension where mistakes go. Think about that for a second. The show is so meta-aware that it treats its own abandoned character designs as canonical errors that exist within the show's universe. And that brings us to The Void, which is, in my opinion, the single most impressive piece of world building in any Cartoon Network show of the 2000s, maybe ever. But before we get to The Void itself, I want to talk about how the show set it up, because the groundwork was laid across dozens of episodes before The Void was ever named. From the very first season, there are hints that Elmore operates under rules that aren't quite right. Characters disappear without explanation. Continuity errors happen, and are sometimes acknowledged, by the characters themselves. Reality occasionally glitches, static on screen, moments of visual distortion, breaches in the fourth wall that suggest the world is thinner than it appears. These moments were easy to dismiss as random comedy in the early season, but viewed retrospectively, with knowledge of what the void is and what it does, they form a pattern. The show was teaching its audience to see the cracks. It just didn't tell them what was behind the cracks until season 3. The void first appears in the season 3 episode of the same name, The Void. And here's the setup. Gumball and Darwin start noticing strange things. A photograph is blurry where a person should be. A locker has disappeared. Something feels wrong, but nobody else seems to notice. With the help of their school counselor, Mr. Small, they eventually realize that a former classmate named Molly, a gray sauropod dinosaur who appeared in season 1, has vanished from existence. Not died, vanished. Erased from everyone's memories. Her house is gone. Her spot in photos is blank. Nobody remembers her. Mr. Small explains that things frequently go missing in Elmore, including someone named Janice, the love of his life, whom he only remembers because he wears a tinfoil hat. His theory? Molly was erased because she was boring. The universe found her uninteresting and simply removed her. They discover a fold in the fabric of reality where Molly's treehouse used to be. When they open it, they fall into the void, a vast, chaotic dimension that looks like television static, filled with everything the world has ever deemed a mistake. Failed inventions, outdated trends, abandoned prototypes, 80s hairspray, Keytars, Pluto, yes, the former planet, Zeppelins, erased after the Hindenburg disaster, and Molly, frozen in her treehouse, not even aware she'd been gone for over a year. They rescue her. They escape. But their memories of the void are erased afterward. And here's the thing that kills me about this episode. It's a comedy. It's funny. The jokes land. But the underlying concept is genuinely horrifying if you think about it for more than 5 seconds. The universe in which these characters live has the power to erase anyone it considers a mistake, and nobody will remember they existed. No evidence, no trace, no grief. The person is simply gone. And the show frames this as a cosmic inevitability, not the work of a villain, but the fundamental nature of their reality. The world is curated. The boring, the outdated, the purposeless, they get deleted. And that concept, once introduced, casts a shadow over the entire show. Every background character who stops appearing, every running gag that gets dropped, every one-off joke that's never referenced again. Are they in the void? Were they mistakes? Is Elmore constantly editing itself? And this is where Rob comes in. And Rob might be the most brilliantly conceived character in the entire show. Rob was a background character, a blue cyclops. He appeared briefly in a handful of early episodes. The Third, The Party, The Pony, doing absolutely nothing of consequence. In The Pony, Gumball and Darwin can't even remember his name. They call him various wrong names. He falls down a manhole. Nobody cares. And that's the point. Rob was so forgettable, so purposeless, so lacking in any defining characteristic, that the universe judged him a mistake and sent him to the void. But here's where it gets incredible. When Gumball and Darwin entered the void to rescue Molly, Rob was there. You can see him in the background of the void if you're paying attention. He called out for help. They didn't hear him. They rescued Molly and left, and Rob grabbed onto the back of Mr. Small's van as it was pulled through the closing portal. The escape disfigured him. His body became glitchy, polygonal, covered in patches of television static. He lost his memory, and he ended up hiding in the Wattersons' basement. In The Nobody, Season 4, Gumball and Darwin find this disfigured, amnesiac stranger living in their home. He tells them he doesn't know who he is. He says he's a nobody. He says he has no reason to exist. And then Gumball and Darwin, trying to help, suggest that he become their villain, because Elmore doesn't have one. Every role in town is filled. The hero, the nerd, the bully, the love interest, except the bad guy. And Rob, remembering that he was abandoned in the void by the very people now standing in front of him, takes the role. He becomes Dr. Wrecker. He swears vengeance on Gumball, not because he's evil, because it's the only identity available to him. I need you to sit with that for a second. A character was so unimportant that reality itself deleted him. He was rescued by accident, damaged in the process, and then given a purpose only because the protagonists needed someone to fight. His villainy is not a choice made from malice. It's a role assigned by narrative necessity. And over the course of several seasons, Rob gradually becomes aware that his world is fictional. He discovers that nothing in Elmore is real. He learns that the void isn't just a place where mistakes go. It's a force that could eventually destroy everything. And in his final appearances, he tries to save everyone, not through heroism, but through a desperate, incompetent, antagonistic attempt to warn people about something they don't believe is coming. He fails. He falls into the void, and the show ends. Or at least, that's where it ended in 2019. The series finale, The Inquisition, Season 6, Episode 44, June 24th, 2019, concludes with the void beginning to consume Elmore. Rob has been trying to turn the characters into live-action humans, believing this will transport them to the other place, essentially our reality, and save them from being erased. Nobody listens. The school starts crumbling. Static fills the screen. Rob falls. The credits roll. Cliffhanger. And fans lost their minds. Bacalé later stated that ending on a cliffhanger was not his decision, and that the resolution was intended for a movie. The movie was announced in development by Warner Media in February 2021 and greenlit by Cartoon Network in September 2021 under the title The Amazing World of Gumball, the movie. But as of the time I'm making this video, it still hasn't been released, and its status has been complicated by the launch of The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball, the revival/spin-off series that premiered on Hulu on July 28, 2025. That revival, which Bacalé is executive producing with new showrunners Matt Lazell and Eric Fountain, has apparently absorbed elements of the movie's storyline into its own continuity, with the resolution of the Void arc set for a season finale episode called The Rewrite. And here's an iceberg detail that I find fascinating. In The Rewrite, it's revealed that Rob was saved from the Void by the van shopkeeper, a mysterious character who sells reality-bending objects from a van, and Rob eventually succeeds the shopkeeper as the owner of the awesome store. The character who was deemed a mistake by reality, who was erased and forgotten, and disfigured and forced into villainy, ends up as the guardian of a store full of cosmic-level artifacts. The reject becomes the keeper of secrets. If that's not a perfect metaphor for the show's entire ethos, that rejected ideas have value, that mistakes contain potential, then I don't know what is. And this is a good moment to talk about something that I think elevates Gumball above its contemporaries, in ways that even its biggest fans don't always articulate. The show understands failure, not as a plot device, though it uses failure as a plot device constantly, but as a philosophical concept. Gumball fails at almost everything he does. He fails at school. He fails at sports. He fails at being cool. He fails at romance, at least until the relationship with Penny stabilizes. He fails at following rules, at understanding consequences, at basic common sense. And the show never punishes him for these failures in the way that traditional children's television does. It doesn't use failure as a setup for a lesson learned moment where the character improves. Gumball fails, and then he fails again, and then he fails differently, and the show suggests that this is fine. That failure is the normal condition of existence, and that the people who claim otherwise are either lying or haven't tried anything worth failing at. This is a deeply unconventional message for children's programming. Most kids' shows operate on an improvement narrative. The character makes a mistake, learns from it, and becomes better. Gumball rejects that structure almost entirely. The Wattersons never improve. They never learn. They're exactly as chaotic at the end of Season 6 as they are at the beginning of Season 1. And the show argues, implicitly, that this is okay, that you don't have to be getting better all the time, that some people are just messy, and messiness is not a moral failing, but a way of being in the world. Nicole holds the family together, not because she's made them better people, but because she loves them as they are. And that, a woman loving her family not in spite of their failures, but alongside them, is one of the most honest portrayals of family life in all of animation. Nicole Watterson deserves her own section of the iceberg, because she's one of the most layered characters in the show, and her significance grows the deeper you look. On the surface, Nicole is the straight woman. She's the competent one in a family of lovable idiots. She works an office job. She does the cooking. She does the cleaning. She manages the budget. She is, by default, the only functional adult in the Watterson household. And the comedy often comes from the contrast between her competence and the chaos around her. But underneath that surface reading, Nicole is something much more complex and much more disturbing. Nicole has violent impulses that the show plays for comedy, but that, in a different context, would be deeply concerning. She has episodes of rage that border on superhuman. In The Limit, as I mentioned, she becomes genuinely frightening when pushed past her breaking point. In The Fight, Season 1, she casually defeats Tina Rex, a literal dinosaur, to protect her family. In The Fury, Season 5, it's revealed that Nicole was once a martial arts prodigy who defeated an entire dojo as a child, and that her mother JoJo deliberately tried to suppress her fighting ability because she was afraid of what Nicole could become. This backstory reframes everything. Nicole isn't just competent, she's dangerous. She's a person of extraordinary ability who has been forced to channel all of that ability into mundane domestic life. And the rage that occasionally surfaces isn't random. It's the expression of a woman who knows she could be doing something more, but is instead arguing about utility bills. The Ape, Season 5, takes this even further. Nicole discovers that she and Miss Simeon, her son's vindictive teacher, were once childhood friends whose relationship was destroyed by the competitive pressures of school. The episode explores how the institutional demands of education can turn natural allies into enemies, and how the grudges that form in childhood can persist into adulthood, long after the original cause has been forgotten. It's an episode about Nicole, but it's also an episode about how systems, schools, workplaces, social hierarchies shape people in ways that diminish them. And here's the thing about Nicole that sits deep in the iceberg. She's the character most aware that something is wrong with Elmore, not in the meta-textual sense that Rob understands. She doesn't know the world is fictional, but she senses, on some level, that the rules of her reality are arbitrary and unfair. She's too smart for the world she lives in. She can see the contradictions that other characters accept without question. And the show never resolves this for her. She never gets her breakthrough. She never escapes. She just keeps showing up every day, holding it all together in a world that doesn't deserve her effort. And if that doesn't hit different when you're watching this at 2 in the morning, I don't know what to tell you. Richard is the opposite end of the spectrum, and his character is its own iceberg entry because there's more going on with him than the stupid dad label suggests. Richard Watterson is, by any conventional measure, a terrible father. He's unemployed. He's lazy. He's irresponsible. He eats compulsively. He once caused a citywide power outage. He once nearly destroyed the house trying to make breakfast. He is, in the show's own framing, the largest child in the Watterson household. And the easy reading is that he's a comic device, the bumbling father figure, the Homer Simpson of Gumball's world. But the show does something subtle with Richard that complicates that reading. Richard is kind. He's genuinely kind. Not in a performative way, but in a deep, instinctive way. He loves his children without condition or reservation. He supports them without understanding them. He's present, always present, because he has nowhere else to be and nothing else to do. And in The Choices, when we see the alternate timelines where Nicole could have married someone successful, someone competent, someone who matches her ability, we see that in every one of those timelines, Nicole is less happy. The smart husband doesn't make her laugh. The successful husband doesn't make her feel loved. The competent husband doesn't need her. Richard needs her. And that need, which could be read as codependency in a darker show, is played in Gumball as the foundation of a genuine, messy, imperfect love. The Routine, Season 5, is a Richard episode that sits at a peculiar point in the iceberg because it's simultaneously one of the simplest and most complex episodes the show ever produced. The premise: Richard has to go buy mayonnaise. That's it. That's the episode. But the show transforms this mundane errand into an epic quest, with Richard navigating a series of increasingly absurd obstacles to accomplish the simplest possible task. The episode is a parody of action-adventure narratives, but it's also a portrait of how Richard experiences the world, as a place full of wonder and danger and mystery, even when the objective is a condiment. The episode suggests that Richard's stupidity is, from a different angle, a kind of innocence. He hasn't been worn down by the world the way Nicole has. He hasn't become cynical. He still finds everything surprising. And there's something beautiful about that. Even as the show never lets you forget that his inability to buy groceries without causing a crisis is also a genuine problem. Let me talk about Elmore itself, because the town is its own character in a way that goes beyond the usual setting as character cliche. Elmore is populated by creatures that shouldn't be able to coexist. 2D characters interact with 3D characters. Animated beings share space with live-action objects. A ghost sits next to a banana, sits next to a cloud, sits next to a dinosaur, sits next to a sentient piece of toast. There are no rules about what can exist in Elmore. and the show never explains why. Other shows with diverse character populations, like Sesame Street or SpongeBob, establish a logic for why different kinds of creatures coexist. Gumball doesn't. It simply presents a world where everything exists simultaneously and dares you to question it. And the deeper lore of the show, the Void, Rob's Ark, Banana Barbara's prophecies, suggests that this isn't random, that the diversity of animation styles and character types in Elmore is the result of a specific process. Things are created, things are discarded. The Void maintains order by removing mistakes. What's left is the curated chaos we see on screen. Elmore isn't random. It's the result of a process of cosmic editing, and the show's animation technique, the mixing of media, is itself a reflection of that process. Every character looks different because every character comes from a different source. They're all rejects from different realities, different art styles, different creative visions, and they've all ended up here, in this one town, living together. Think about that for a second. The show about rejected characters, created from rejected character designs, set in a world that rejects characters it doesn't need. The theme isn't just present in the text, it is the text. It's the production process. It's the creation story. It's the mythology. The entire thing, from conception to execution, is about what happens to the things nobody wants. And the answer, consistently, is something amazing. Remember what I said at the beginning about Bakalay's folder of rejected character designs? This is where it pays off. Rob's entire arc is, on a meta level, the story of the show itself. Rejected characters find purpose. Failed ideas become great ones. The thing nobody wanted becomes the thing everyone loves. Bakalay took his folder of failures and made something extraordinary, and then he built a character within the show who lives through the same experience. Let me go deeper into the iceberg now, because there's a whole layer about the show's relationship with its own medium, the metatextual stuff, that most analysis doesn't fully capture. Gumball is one of the most meta-aware shows in animation history. Characters frequently acknowledge that they're in a cartoon. They reference animation budget limitations. They comment on the quality of their own show's writing. In The Signal, Season 4, broadcast interference starts causing reality to glitch, and the characters experience jump cuts, audio distortions, and repeating loops. The episode plays like a found-footage horror film, except the horror is that the television broadcast itself is breaking down. In The Disaster and The Rerun, a two-parter spanning seasons 4 and 5, Rob acquires a universal remote that can pause, rewind, fast-forward, and skip chapters of reality, treating the universe literally like a television program. He uses the AV button to access the Void. He kills the van shopkeeper by erasing him from existence with the remote. The conceit is audacious, a villain who can control the medium through which the audience is watching, and it's executed with the visual flair and comedic timing that defines Gumball at its best. I want to take a detour here and talk about the show's approach to comedy, because understanding how Gumball is funny is itself an iceberg entry. The show operates on at least 4 distinct levels of humor simultaneously. The first level is physical comedy, slapstick, characters getting hit, falling, crashing, exploding. This is the surface layer that works for the youngest viewers and that casual watchers notice first. And Gumball does physical comedy extremely well. The mixed media animation gives slapstick a surreal quality, because a 2D character being hit by a 3D object against a photographic background creates a collision of visual registers that amplifies the impact. The second level is dialogue comedy. Wordplay, puns, rapid-fire exchanges, absurdist logic. Gumball's dialogue is dense with jokes, many of which are delivered so quickly that you miss them on first viewing. The writers, many of whom came from a British comedy tradition, have a knack for building conversations that escalate logically from a reasonable starting point to an absurd conclusion, with each step making perfect internal sense. It's the logic of Monty Python applied to a children's cartoon, and when it works, which is most of the time, it creates comedy that rewards rewatching because you catch new jokes every time. The third level is visual comedy, background gags, character expressions that last for a single frame, signs and posters in the photographic backgrounds that contain their own jokes. The animation style shifts that occur within episodes to match tonal changes, a character's face morphing into a different art style for emphasis. This level is the most unique to Gumball because of the mixed media approach. No other show has as many visual registers to play with, and the animators exploit every one of them. The fourth level is meta-comedy, references to the show being a show, characters acknowledging animation conventions, episodes that parody specific genres or media forms, the entire Void mythology, which is essentially a comedy about the production process of television. This level is what gives Gumball its reputation as a smart cartoon, and it's the level that has generated the most analysis and the most dedicated fans. What makes Gumball exceptional is that all four levels operate simultaneously. In any given scene, there might be a physical gag happening in the foreground, a dialogue joke being delivered, a visual gag in the background, and a meta-textual reference embedded in the framing. The density is remarkable, and it explains why the show has developed such a committed adult fanbase, despite being aimed at children. There's simply too much happening in each episode for a single viewing to capture it all. Now back to the meta-textual layer, because there's more to discuss. The Test, Season 4, might be my favorite meta episode. Gumball discovers that a new student named Tobias has essentially stolen his role as the show's protagonist. The episode starts restructuring itself around Tobias, complete with a laugh track, simpler jokes, and a different visual style. Gumball finds himself pushed to the margins of his own show, becoming a supporting character. The animation literally changes to reflect the genre shift. It's a parody of formulaic sitcoms, but it's also a genuinely unsettling exploration of what it means to lose your identity, to watch your own story be given to someone else. And Gumball's increasing frustration isn't played purely for laugh. There's real anxiety underneath it. What if you're replaceable? What if the thing that makes you you can just be assigned to someone else? And I want to linger on the Test for a moment longer, because I think it illustrates something important about how the show evolved across its 6 seasons. In the early episodes, seasons 1 and 2, the meta-awareness was lighter. Characters would break the fourth wall occasionally, but the show's primary mode was family comedy with surreal elements. The comedy was broad. The emotional moments were sincere, but relatively simple. And the world building, while visually inventive, wasn't yet layered with the deep mythology that would come later. Season 3 was the turning point. The Kids addressed the voice actor change head-on. The Void introduced the show's central mythology. The Shell gave Penny her transformation. The name revealed Gumball's identity crisis. And the tone shifted. The comedy got sharper. The emotional moments got more complex. The meta-awareness deepened from occasional fourth-wall breaks to a sustained, coherent commentary on the nature of fiction itself. If seasons 1 and 2 are the surface of the iceberg, season 3 is where you start descending. Seasons 4 and 5 are, by most fan consensus, the peak. The animation is at its most refined. The writing is at its densest. The mythology, the Void, Rob, Banana Barbara's prophecies, is fully developed and woven through the episodic structure with remarkable precision. These are the seasons that produced The Disaster and The Rerun, The Safety, The Choices, The Origins, The Console, and dozens of other episodes that demonstrate the show operating at the absolute height of its powers. The comedy is faster. The emotional beats hit harder. The meta-textual layer is more sophisticated. And the visual experimentation is more ambitious. Episodes that parody specific genres commit fully to their conceits, transforming the show's look and feel for entire episodes at a time. Season 6 is more divisive. Some fans consider it a continuation of the peak. Others feel it's slightly less consistent, with more episodes that feel like filler between the mythology-heavy installments. The season's primary contribution to the iceberg is the escalation of the Void storyline toward its conclusion in the Inquisition. Episodes like The Future and The Inquisition itself are among the most dramatically ambitious in the entire series. But the season also contains more experimental one-off episodes that show the creators pushing the format in new directions even as the mythology builds toward its climax. The evolution across 6 seasons is itself an iceberg entry, because understanding how the show changed helps explain why different fans have different entry points and different favorite episodes. A viewer who watched Gumball primarily during seasons 1 and 2 has a fundamentally different relationship with the show than a viewer who came in during seasons 4 and 5. The former knows Gumball as a bright, funny, visually inventive family comedy. The latter knows it as a meta-textual masterpiece with existential horror elements. Both are correct. Both versions of the show are real. The iceberg contains both. Bacalé himself has talked about this evolution. In the Squiggly interview, he discussed his long-term plan for the show, the overarching plot that would build from season 3 to the show's eventual conclusion. He talked about wanting to explore the true nature of the amazing world of Gumball. Why is it like that? Why does it look like that? And he talked about the excitement of building towards something, of having a destination for the show's mythology that would give all the individual episodes a cumulative weight. That plan was disrupted by the show's cancellation after season 6, which left the Void storyline unresolved. Whether the eventual resolution in the rewrite matches Bakalay's original vision is something only he can answer. But the existence of that vision, the fact that from season 3 onward, the show was building towards something specific, gives the show a structural coherence that many episodic comedies lack. Even when you're watching a standalone episode, you're watching it within a world that has an approaching apocalypse. And that knowledge changes the viewing experience permanently. The Copycats, season 5, takes the meta-awareness in a completely different direction. The episode features a family of characters who are blatant copies of the Wattersons. Same colors, same dynamics, same situations, who move to Elmore and start living their lives in parallel. Everything the Wattersons do, the copies do slightly worse, and they end up getting credit for the Wattersons' ideas. The episode is a direct, barely disguised commentary on Miracle Star, a Chinese animated series that was widely accused of plagiarizing Gumball. The character designs, situations, and animation style of Miracle Star bore unmistakable similarities to Gumball, and the show's creators were not subtle about their feelings. In The Copycats, the knockoff family is eventually defeated, and the episode ends with a message about originality and creative integrity. It's one of the few times an animated show has directly addressed real-world plagiarism within an episode, and it's handled with more anger and specificity than you'd expect from a children's cartoon. And there's the Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared crossover. The Puppets, season 5, features characters and settings from Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, the dystopian puppet web series that became a viral sensation. The episode sees Darwin being pulled into the DHMIS world, and the tonal shift is jarring and deliberate. The usual warmth and color of Gumball gives way to the grimy, unsettling aesthetic of DHMIS, and the episode becomes genuinely unnerving for a Cartoon Network show. Bakalay and the DHMIS creators, Becky Sloan and Joseph Pelling, were friends, and the crossover was born from genuine mutual admiration. The fact that Cartoon Network allowed a character from their family show to enter a world associated with body horror and psychological manipulation, tells you something about the creative freedom Bakalay had. I keep coming back to this word, freedom. It's the thread running through the entire iceberg. Bakalay was given an unusual amount of creative freedom for a children's television show, and he used every inch of it. The mixed media animation, the metatextual storytelling, the void mythology, the crossovers, the direct commentary on plagiarism, the willingness to let episodes get genuinely dark. None of this happens if the creator is on a short leash. And I think that freedom came, in part, from the show being produced in Europe. Cartoon Network Development Studio Europe, based in London, operated with a degree of independence from the American headquarters. The culture was different. The expectations were different. And the result was a show that feels distinct from its American-produced contemporaries. Adventure Time, Regular Show, Steven Universe, while existing alongside them on the same network. Gumball has a European sensibility. Its humor is drier. Its visual references are broader. Its willingness to be absurd for absurdity's sake comes from a different tradition, and that difference is part of what makes it special. Let me talk about the show's voice acting history, because there's an iceberg layer here that connects to the show's themes in ways people don't always notice. Gumball has gone through multiple voice actors for its lead characters, and each transition represents a moment where the show had to grapple with the passage of time. Logan Grove voiced Gumball for the first 2 seasons. Jacob Hopkins took over for seasons 3 through 5. Nicholas Cantu voiced Gumball for season 6. And in the wonderfully weird world of Gumball, the 2025 revival, Alkayo Thile takes on the role. Kwesi Bawaki voiced Darwin for the first 2 seasons, and Terrell Ransom Jr. took over from season 3 onward. For the revival, Hero Hunter voices Darwin. These transitions are unusual for animated shows, where characters typically maintain the same voice actor for their entire run. The reason Gumball keeps changing is that the characters are children, and children's voice actors grow up. Their voices change. And rather than using adults to voice kids, which many shows do, Gumball has historically cast actual children, which gives the performances an authenticity, but also an expiration date. And the show, characteristically, folded this limitation into its storytelling. The kids addressed the voice change directly. And Bacalé talked in the Squiggly interview about how important it was to acknowledge the departure of the original actors within the narrative, rather than pretending nothing had changed. He said it was important to say goodbye. That awareness of change, that willingness to let the show acknowledge its own impermanence, is very much in keeping with the themes of The Void. Things change, people move on, and the show absorbs those changes rather than hiding from them. Here's something that sits deeper in the iceberg. Bacalé has said in interviews that the overarching plot of the show, The Void, Rob, the nature of Elmore, was designed from relatively early on. In the Squiggly interview, he said, "I've now designed this overarching plot running all the way to when we finally finish the show, and we're going to build up to that, which is very exciting." He talked about wanting to explore the true nature of the amazing world of Gumball. Why is it like that? Why does it look like that? There's this mysterious reason why everything looks the way it does, and why things work the way they do. This suggests that the mixed media animation, the fact that different characters exist in different visual styles, isn't just an aesthetic choice. It's a narrative one. The world of Elmore looks the way it does because, within the show's mythology, there's a reason for it. Different characters have different visual styles because they come from different sources, different creation methods, different levels of reality. And the void, the dimension that erases mistakes, is the mechanism by which the world maintains its coherence. Remove the boring, remove the outdated, remove the things that don't fit, and what's left is the curated, chaotic, impossible world of Elmore. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't a light video, and we're about to go even deeper. The show has had episodes censored in various territories for various reasons. The Season 2 episode, The Joy, which parodies zombie movies with a contagious happiness virus that turns the school into mindless grinning drones, was edited in some regions because the imagery was deemed too disturbing for younger viewers. The virus spreads through a multicolored discharge that the infected characters smear on others, and the episode is presented in found footage style through the school's security cameras. It's genuinely unsettling. The animation shifts to a more distorted, corrupted style as the infection spreads, and some broadcasters decided it was too much. There are also episodes that deal with surprisingly adult themes in ways that went over younger viewers' heads, but landed hard for older ones. The Shell, Season 3, features Penny breaking out of her peanut shell for the first time, revealing a shape-shifting fairy creature underneath. The episode is about vulnerability, identity, and the fear of being seen for who you really are. When Penny's father rejects her new form, it's played with genuine emotional weight. There's a sequence where Penny transforms uncontrollably through a series of monstrous forms: a dragon, a gorgon, a demon, and the metaphor is clear. She's afraid that showing her true self will make people see her as a monster. And Gumball's response, running toward her, not away, is one of the most emotionally resonant moments in any animated show of the decade. The Choices, Season 4, reveals Nicole's backstory in a format that plays like a branching path narrative. We see every possible version of Nicole's life depending on the choices she makes, and the episode systematically demonstrates that in every timeline where she doesn't meet Richard, she's more successful, but less happy. It's a love story told through multiverse theory, and the emotional punch at the end, when Nicole chooses the messy, imperfect life with Richard over every better alternative, is devastating because the show has spent 4 seasons showing us exactly how messy and imperfect that life is. We know what she's choosing. We know it's not the smart choice, and we understand why she chooses it anyway. These are the episodes that make Gumball more than a comedy, and they exist alongside episodes where Richard eats everything in the house, or Gumball gets his head stuck in a vending machine, or Banana Joe does something unhinged. The show contains multitudes, and the iceberg format is perfect for it because the surface and the depths coexist simultaneously. You can watch Gumball as pure comedy and have a great time, but if you look deeper, there's a fully constructed mythology, a metatextual framework, an emotional sophistication that rivals shows specifically designed for adult audiences. And I haven't even talked about some of the other emotionally devastating episodes yet, because there are more than people realize. The Origins, a 2-part special in Season 4, tells the story of how Darwin first came to be part of the Watterson family. We see him as a regular goldfish, flushed down the toilet by a young Gumball who didn't understand what he was doing. And then, we watch Darwin survive. He grows legs, crawls out of the sewer, travels across the country, endures incredible hardships, all driven by a single desire to get back to Gumball. The episode plays like a survival drama, crossed with a buddy road movie, and the animation shifts styles to match each stage of Darwin's journey. When he finally reaches the Wattersons' door and speaks his first word, Gumball, it's one of those moments where you're laughing and crying at the same time, because the show has earned that emotion through 20 minutes of genuinely brilliant storytelling. And the fact that this is the origin story of a fish who grew legs, in any other show, that would be a throwaway joke. In Gumball, it's an epic. The money, Season 4, breaks the fourth wall in a way that's structurally unique. The Wattersons are so broke that the show itself starts falling apart. Product placement begins appearing. Characters start advertising things. The animation quality degrades. The implication is that the show needs sponsors to continue existing. And the family's financial desperation literally destabilizes their reality. It's a commentary on commercialism in children's television, told through the conceit that the characters are aware of the economic forces that sustain their existence. No other animated show has done anything quite like it. The Matchmaker, Season 5, takes a simple premise. Darwin develops a crush and turns it into an exploration of consent, manipulation, and emotional boundaries that's more thoughtful than most adult dramas. When Carrie, the ghost, manipulates circumstances to get closer to Darwin, the show doesn't play it as cute or romantic. It examines the power dynamics involved and ultimately concludes that genuine affection can't be manufactured through scheming. For a show aimed at 6 to 12-year-olds, that's a remarkably mature message, delivered without a hint of preachiness. And then there's The Nobody, the episode where Rob is discovered in the Wattersons' basement. I've already discussed the plot, but I want to talk about the craft of this episode because it demonstrates something about Gumball that doesn't get enough attention. The episode is genuinely creepy. The way Rob is filmed, in shadows, glitching, his voice distorted, creates real tension. The Wattersons' house, usually a place of warmth and chaos, becomes a location from a horror film. The lighting changes, the music shifts, and when Rob reveals himself, his design, half cartoon, half television static, polygonal and broken, is unsettling in a way that no children's show character has any right to be. The animators at Studio Soy clearly understood that Rob's visual design needed to communicate his internal state. Fractured, incomplete, caught between worlds. He looks like what he is, a character who was dragged through the gap between existence and non-existence, and didn't come out whole. It's extraordinary character design, and it elevates what could have been a simple villain reveal into something genuinely affecting. I want to circle back to something about the show's animation that sits in the mid-iceberg range. Each character in Gumball exists in their own visual medium, and this isn't just an aesthetic flourish, it's a storytelling tool. Penny, after emerging from her shell, is fully 3D rendered, which makes her look slightly more real than the other characters, and contributes to the sense that she's from a different world. The Donut Sheriff is rendered in a style that suggests he's made of actual dough. Hector, the giant, exists at a different scale that requires specific camera angles and composition choices whenever he appears. Tina Rex is animated with a weight and mass that distinguishes her from the 2D characters around her. And Susie, that live-action chin puppet, exists in what feels like an entirely different reality from everyone else, which creates comedy simply through her presence in scenes. When Susie appears next to a 2D character against a photographic background, the collision of visual registers is inherently funny, and the show knows this. The animation team also does something incredibly clever with their background choices. Different areas of Elmore have different photographic qualities. The school tends to use interior photographs with fluorescent lighting. The Wattersons' house uses warm, domestic photography. The more dangerous or dramatic locations use photographs with starker contrast and more ominous shadows. This means the show can signal tone changes through the backgrounds alone before a single character has spoken a word. It's subliminal, but it's effective. And it's the kind of detail that only becomes apparent when you've watched dozens of episodes back to back and start noticing patterns. Let me talk about the production specifics, because there's an iceberg layer here that animation fans especially will appreciate. The first 3 seasons of Gumball were produced as 20 episodes of 22 minutes each, consisting of 2 11-minute segments. In the United States, these segments aired separately, while internationally, they aired as paired half hours. Starting with Season 4, the show shifted to producing 11-minute segments individually, which is the standard format for most Cartoon Network shows. This shift coincided with the show hitting its creative stride. Seasons 4 and 5 are widely considered the peak of the series, when the meta storytelling, the void mythology, and the character development were all firing on all cylinders. The international production pipeline was complex. Animation was handled by multiple studios across multiple countries. Studio Soy in Ludwigsburg, Germany, handled CGI elements and compositing throughout the series' run. Boulder Media in Dublin, Ireland contributed 2D animation work. The show was written and developed at the London studio. Voice recording took place in various locations, depending on the language and territory. The sheer logistical complexity of producing a show that combines this many animation techniques across this many countries is staggering, and it's one reason why no other show has successfully replicated Gumball's visual approach. It's not just an aesthetic, it's a production infrastructure. And here's a production detail I love. The real-world photographs used for Elmore's backgrounds were primarily shot in and around London, even though the town is supposed to be in California. Sharp-eyed viewers have spotted British road markings, British shop fronts, and British architectural details in what's supposed to be an American suburb. Bocquelet, being French-British himself, presumably found it more practical to photograph his immediate surroundings than to fly to California. The result is that Elmore has this slightly off quality. It looks like America, but doesn't quite feel like it, which actually enhances the show's surreal tone. Everything in Elmore is almost normal, but not quite. The backgrounds contribute to that feeling, whether intentionally or not. Let me take you to the deepest layers now, the things that only the most obsessive fans know about. There was an unaired pilot for the show. Before the full series was greenlit, a pilot was produced to demonstrate the concept. This pilot features earlier character designs, slightly different color palettes, and a rougher animation style. It was never broadcast, but has been seen by fans who've tracked it down. Elements from the pilot, particularly early character designs, appear in the void within the show itself, as I mentioned earlier. The show treats its own discarded production history as in-universe canon, which is one of the most creatively daring decisions any animated series has ever made. The early reel, which predates the pilot, is even rarer. This was the initial animation test, produced to sell the concept to Cartoon Network executives. Studio Soy helped create it. It's the earliest animated footage of Gumball and his world, and it looks significantly different from the final show. Very few people outside the production have seen it in full, though clips and screenshots have circulated in fan communities. Daniel Leonard, the Turner Broadcasting executive who greenlit the show, is referenced within the show itself. In The Plan, Season 2, the Wattersons need to save Nicole from a mysterious man named Daniel Leonard. This is the actual name of the real executive who approved the show's production. It's the kind of in-joke that would fly completely over a child viewer's head, but that adults in the animation industry would immediately recognize. The show does this kind of thing constantly, burying references to its own production history, its network, its creators, and its industry within the text of the episodes. Let me talk about Penny Fitzgerald, because her character arc is one of the deepest entries in the iceberg, and one of the most emotionally rich in the show. For the first 2 seasons, Penny is Gumball's crush. She's a peanut with antlers, literally a peanut-shaped character with antler-like protrusions. She's sweet. She likes Gumball back. Their relationship is a will they won't they that provides lighthearted romantic tension. Standard children's television stuff. And then the shell happens in season 3, and everything changes. In the shell, Penny's physical shell cracks during a school play, and for the first time, we see what's underneath. She's not a peanut at all. She's a shape-shifting fairy creature, a being of pure, uncontained form that can become anything. A deer, a dragon, a gorgon, a demon. The revelation is visually stunning. The 3D rendering of Penny's true form is gorgeous, a deliberate contrast to the flat peanut design that contained her. And the episode's emotional arc is about the terror of being seen. Penny's family, especially her father, has kept her in her shell because they're afraid of what she is. They've constrained her into a small, safe, acceptable form. And when she breaks free, the first thing she feels is shame, because the reactions of people around her confirm that what she really is might be monstrous. The episode handles this with extraordinary care. When Penny transforms uncontrollably through a series of frightening forms, a gorgon that turns objects to stone, a dragon that breathes fire, a demon that terrifies bystanders. The metaphor is impossible to miss. She's afraid that showing her true self will prove that she's the monster everyone fears. And Gumball's response, running toward her, embracing her regardless of what form she takes, telling her that he wants to be with her no matter what she looks like, is one of the most emotionally resonant moments in any animated show of the decade. It's a love story, yes, but it's also a story about identity, about the shells we wear, about the forms we take to make ourselves acceptable to the people around us, and about what happens when someone loves us enough to see past those forms. After the shell, Penny exists in the show as a 3D rendered character, visually distinct from the 2D characters around her. She's literally operating in a different medium, and this visual distinction serves a narrative purpose. Penny, having shed her shell, is more real than the characters who still hide behind their constructed forms. She occupies a different layer of the show's visual reality, and the fact that the animators chose to render her differently after her transformation, not just giving her a new 2D design, but actually shifting her into a different animation style, demonstrates the kind of visual storytelling that only Gumball can do. No other show has the mixed media toolkit to make a character's emotional transformation manifest as a literal change in their animation technique. I also want to mention a few of the classmates who have their own iceberg entries, because the supporting cast of Gumball is extraordinarily deep. Carrie Kruger is a ghost. She's been dead the entire time. The show occasionally acknowledges this, but rarely dwells on it, treating Carrie's ghostliness as just another character trait rather than a defining tragedy. But when you think about it, really think about it, there's a child at this school who is dead. She has emotions, she has friendships, she has a crush on Darwin, but she's dead. And in a different show, that would be the entire focus of her character. In Gumball, it's incidental, which tells you something about Elmore. Death is not an ending there. It's just another state of being. Bobbert is a robot who struggles with understanding human emotions and social norms. His episodes often play with questions of artificial intelligence, consciousness, and what it means to be alive. In The Bet, Season 2, he's essentially enslaved by Gumball, and the episode addresses the ethics of treating a sentient being as property. In The Upgrade, Season 5, he receives a software update that makes him dangerous, raising questions about technology's potential to become uncontrollable. Bobbert is a minor character, but his episodes consistently engage with philosophical questions about intelligence and personhood that most shows aimed at children don't touch. Alan is a sentient balloon. His defining trait is that he's excessively nice, so nice that it becomes its own form of manipulation. In The Saint, Season 4, Gumball tries repeatedly to make Alan lose his temper, only to discover that Alan's niceness isn't a front, but a genuine, unshakable aspect of his character. Except, and this is the dark iceberg reading, Alan's niceness serves him. It makes everyone like him. It makes him untouchable. It gives him social power without the appearance of seeking it. The show never explicitly states that Alan is a manipulator, but the implications are there for viewers who want to see them. Is Alan genuinely good, or is goodness itself a form of control? The show poses the question and walks away. And then there's Miss Simeon, the school teacher, who has her own fascinating iceberg entry. She's been teaching at Elmore Junior High for hundreds of years. She hates her job. She hates her students. She particularly hates Gumball and Darwin. And in The Ape, we learn that her bitterness stems from a specific personal history with Nicole. She and Nicole were once childhood friends whose relationship was destroyed by the competitive pressures of the school system. Miss Simeon became a teacher, not out of vocation, but out of a lack of alternatives. She's trapped in a role she despises, surrounded by children she doesn't like, in a school that hasn't changed in centuries. And the show, while never excusing her cruelty, invites the viewer to understand it as the product of a system that grinds people down over decades until all that's left is resentment. Bacalé voices Sussy's wailing, screaming, and laughter. That live-action chin puppet character with the googly eyes, those sounds are the show's creator. There's something wonderfully strange about the fact that the man who created this entire universe is vocally present in it through the most chaotic, nonsensical character in the cast. The show's theme song was composed by Ben Lockett, who scored the entire series. The opening has been modified multiple times across the show's run, with slight variations in animation and lyric. The music of Gumball is a hugely underappreciated aspect of the show. Lockett's scores range from orchestral to electronic to jazz to rock, often within the same episode, and they're always precisely calibrated to enhance the comedy and emotion of each scene. And here's something I find genuinely moving about the show's legacy. The Amazing World of Gumball ended in 2019 with that cliffhanger. For years, fans campaigned for a resolution. The movie was announced, delayed, complicated by corporate restructuring at Warner Bros. Discovery. And then, in 2025, the revival came. The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball, premiering on Hulu on July 28, 2025, with Bacalé back as executive producer. It's not technically a 7th season. Bacalé himself clarified on July 26, 2025, that it's a spin-off and continuation, but it's set in the same world, with the same characters, and it continues the Void storyline that was left unresolved. The first season consists of 40 episodes, with 20 having aired by late 2025. A second season of 40 additional episodes was ordered in December 2025, and Bacalé has indicated he's already writing Season 8. There are more iceberg entries I want to cover before we wrap up, because some of them are too fascinating to skip. Banana Barbara, Banana Joe's mother, has the ability to paint the future. This was introduced in The Oracle, and becomes increasingly significant as the show's mythology develops. Her paintings depict events that haven't happened yet with perfect accuracy, and in later seasons, her paintings become the primary mechanism through which characters glimpse the approaching void. In the future, her paintings start showing nothing but static, the implication being that the future itself has been erased. When Rob kidnaps her and forces her to paint, she can only produce images of destruction, and the show plays this for horror. The idea that a prophet has nothing left to prophesy because the future no longer exists is a concept worthy of literary science fiction, and it's happening in a show where Banana Joe is a recurring character whose entire gag is that he's a sentient banana. The awesome store, the mysterious van in the Elmore Mall parking garage where Rob acquired the Universal Remote, has its own iceberg entry. The van is operated by a figure known as the Van Shopkeeper, or the Shady Man, who sells reality-altering objects to anyone willing to pay. The shopkeeper is one of only 2 characters in the entire show who is aware that the world is fictional, the other being Rob. The shopkeeper's identity, motivations, and nature are never fully explained in the original series. He exists outside the normal rules of Elmore. He can't be harmed by the void, because he seems to exist apart from it. In the rewrite, the revival series resolution episode, it's revealed that Rob succeeds the shopkeeper as the owner of the awesome store, which positions the show's former villain as a kind of cosmic gatekeeper. The shopkeeper is one of those characters who sits at the very bottom of the iceberg, because his full significance is never spelled out. You have to piece it together across multiple seasons and multiple shows. The show's relationship with Cartoon Network itself is worth discussing as an iceberg entry. In The Boredom, Season 5, characters from Clarence, Regular Show, and Uncle Grandpa make cameo appearances. These aren't just Easter eggs. They're part of a sequence where Gumball and Darwin are scrolling through Elmore's equivalent of the internet and stumble across content from other shows. It's the show acknowledging that it exists within a network ecosystem, that these other shows are neighbors in a programming block. And it's done with the casual self-awareness that characterizes Gumball's approach to meta-humor. There's also the matter of the show's adult humor, which is its own iceberg tier. Gumball is packed with jokes aimed squarely at parents watching with their children, and some of them are remarkably risque for a show rated TVY7. References to existential philosophy, jokes about marital frustration, visual gags that suggest things the dialogue can't say, Nicole's barely contained rage, which reads differently to adults who understand the specific stresses of motherhood, Richard's childlike obliviousness, which is funny to kids but recognizable to adults as a particular kind of male incompetence. The show operates on 2 tracks simultaneously, and the adult track is often darker and more cynical than the children's track. This dual-layered approach is common in contemporary animation, but Gumball does it with a precision and density that's unusual. I've rewatched probably 30 episodes in the process of putting this video together, and the thing that strikes me every time is the density. The jokes come so fast that you miss half of them on first viewing. There are visual gags in the background that have nothing to do with the foreground action. Characters make faces that last for a single frame. The photography-based backgrounds contain hidden details, signs, posters, advertisements that reward pausing. The show is designed to be watched multiple times, and each viewing reveals something new. That's not accidental. That's a design philosophy. Bacalé and his team understood that the show's mixed media approach created an unusually rich visual field, and they filled every corner of it with content. The show's fanbase deserves its own iceberg entry. Gumball developed a significant online following, particularly on platforms like Tumblr, Reddit, and YouTube, where fan communities have analyzed episodes in extraordinary detail. The show's meta-aware humor created a feedback loop with its audience. Fans would create theories about the void, about Rob's true nature, about the meaning of Banana Barbara's paintings, and the show would sometimes nod to those theories in subsequent episodes. The relationship between the show and its online fanbase is itself a subject worthy of analysis, because it demonstrates how a modern animated series can evolve in conversation with its audience in ways that weren't possible before social media. The Gumball fan community has also done extensive work cataloging the show's hidden details, the early real character designs in the void, the real-world locations used for backgrounds, the continuity connections between episodes, the hidden meanings in Banana Barbara's paintings. Some fans have identified specific London locations that were photographed for backgrounds and matched them to real addresses. Others have tracked every appearance of Rob in background shots before he became a named character, demonstrating that the animators were seeding his eventual importance long before it became narratively explicit. This kind of obsessive fan archaeology is enabled by the show's visual richness. There's simply more to find in a Gumball frame than in most other cartoons. And here's one more deep iceberg detail that I think speaks to the show's core philosophy. In the void, among all the mistakes that reality has discarded, you can find objects and references to real-world things that were genuinely discontinued, abandoned, or deemed failures. Pluto, stripped of its planet status, is in there. Zeppelins, abandoned after the Hindenburg, are in there. The E.T. Atari game, one of the most famous commercial failures in gaming history, is referenced. 80s fashion trends, obsolete technology, historical embarrassments. The void doesn't just contain fictional mistakes. It contains real ones. The dimension where the show puts things that failed is populated by actual failed ideas from our world, which means the show's mythology extends beyond its own fiction into commentary on how real-world culture discards things. We are constantly curating, constantly deciding what's relevant and what's obsolete, constantly sending things to our own version of the void. And the show, by showing us all of these discarded things piled up in one dimension, asks us to consider whether the act of discarding is itself a mistake. That's the kind of question a kid's show shouldn't be asking, and Gumball asks it, quietly, in the background, behind the jokes and the slapstick and the live-action chin puppets. It asks you to think about what we throw away, and whether the things we throw away might be worth keeping. Let me talk about how Gumball sits alongside its contemporaries, because its position in the 2000s animation landscape is itself an iceberg entry. The Amazing World of Gumball premiered in 2011, the same year as the second season of Adventure Time. Regular Show was in its second season. Steven Universe wouldn't premiere until 2013. Gravity Falls started in 2012. This was the beginning of what's often called the Cartoon Network Renaissance, a period when the network's original programming reached an extraordinary level of creative ambition and critical acclaim. And within that landscape, Gumball occupied a unique space. Adventure Time built a deep fantasy mythology. Steven Universe explored emotional complexity and LGBTQ representation with unprecedented depth. Regular Show perfected the art of mundane to insane escalation. Gravity Falls wove a mystery narrative through its comedy. Each of these shows became defined by a specific strength. Gumball's strength was its visual inventiveness and its meta-awareness. No other show in the lineup looked like Gumball or thought about itself the way Gumball did. And while the other shows were more heavily discussed in terms of elevation, the idea that they were raising the bar for what children's animation could be, Gumball was quietly doing something equally impressive, just in a different register. I think the reason Gumball sometimes gets less critical attention than its contemporaries is that its intelligence is disguised more effectively. Adventure Time wears its depth on its sleeve. The world building is prominent. The emotional arcs are explicit. The mythology is front and center. Gumball hides its depth behind comedy. The jokes come so fast and so furiously that it's easy to assume the show is all surface. But the surface is a misdirection. The real content, the void mythology, the metatextual commentary, the character psychology, the philosophical questions, exists underneath the jokes, visible only to viewers who slow down and pay attention. And here's a tangent that I think is relevant. Gumball was also, uniquely among its contemporaries, a European production. Adventure Time, Steven Universe, Regular Show, and Gravity Falls were all produced in the United States. Gumball was produced in London, with animation work in Germany and Ireland. Its creator is French-British. Its sensibility draws from British comedy traditions, Monty Python, The IT Crowd, Fawlty Towers, as much as from American animation conventions. And I think you can feel this difference in the show's humor. There's a dryness to Gumball's wit, a willingness to let a joke hang in silence rather than punctuating it with a reaction shot that comes from a different comedic tradition. American animation tends to telegraph its punchlines. Gumball often lets them pass without comment. And that restraint, trusting the audience to find the joke rather than pointing at it, is a very European quality. The Miracle Star controversy deserves its own extended discussion because it's one of the most bizarre entries on the entire iceberg. Miracle Star is a Chinese animated series that premiered in 2016 and was widely accused of plagiarizing the amazing world of Gumball. The similarities were extensive and unmistakable. The character designs, color schemes, family dynamics, and even specific joke structures bore obvious resemblances to Gumball. The protagonist is a blue cat. He has an orange fish companion. They have a large pink rabbit father figure. The mother is strict and competent. The younger sister is intelligent. The whole thing was so blatant that it became a subject of international discussion in animation circles and on social media. Bocale's response was characteristically Gumball. He made an episode about it. The Copycats, Season 5, Episode 4, features a family called the Chi-Chi and Ribbit, who are thinly veiled parodies of the Miracle Star characters. They move to Elmore and begin mimicking everything the Wattersons do, copying their lives beat for beat. The episode is a direct, angry, funny, and surprisingly nuanced commentary on intellectual property theft in the animation industry. It doesn't just mock the copycat characters. It explores why copying happens, what it does to the original creators, and how imitation, when it lacks understanding of the source material's depth, always falls flat. The copycat family can replicate the Wattersons' actions, but not their motivations, their relationships, or their emotional complexity. They copy the form, but miss the substance. And here's the iceberg detail that makes this even more interesting. After The Copycats aired and brought international attention to the similarities between Gumball and Miracle Star, the Chinese show was reportedly altered to differentiate itself more clearly from its source material. Whether this was a direct result of the episode or of broader legal and public pressure is unclear, but the timeline suggests causation. An animated show used an episode of itself to fight back against plagiarism, and it apparently worked. That's not something that happens often in the entertainment industry. There's one more character detail I want to cover before we start wrapping up, and it's about Gumball himself. In Season 3, the show reveals that Gumball is not the character's real name. It's a nickname. His actual first name is Zach. This is explored in the episode The Name, Season 3, Episode 22, where the Zach persona begins to take over Gumball's personality, transforming him into an arrogant, aggressive person completely unlike his usual self. The episode positions the name change as an existential threat. If Gumball fully becomes Zach, the person we've known for 3 seasons will cease to exist. The other characters have to intervene, and the resolution involves legally changing his name to Gumball to prevent the Zach personality from returning. On one level, this is a comedy about names. On another level, it's about identity, about how the labels we use to define ourselves can shape who we become. On yet another level, it's about the show itself, about the difference between the character the show needs Gumball to be and the character he might become if left to his own devices. And on the deepest level, it's about the void. The universe of Elmore doesn't just delete characters who are boring or outdated. It also constrains characters within their established roles. Gumball must remain Gumball. He cannot become Zach. The name isn't just a preference, it's a mandate from the structure of the world. And that mandate like the void itself, suggests that the characters of Elmore don't have as much free will as they think they do. This connects to what I think is the show's deepest thematic concern. Deeper than the comedy, deeper than the meta-awareness, deeper than the void. The Amazing World of Gumball is, at its core, a show about the relationship between creators and creations, about what it means to be a character in someone else's story, about whether the beings we create have any autonomy, any genuine experience, any right to exist beyond the purpose we assign them. Rob is the most explicit expression of this theme. He's a character who was created without purpose, discarded when he proved unnecessary, and then forced into a role, villain, that was dictated by narrative structure rather than personal choice. His entire arc is a meditation on what it means to be a fictional being who becomes aware of their fiction. He can see the walls of his world. He can see the force, the void, which is really the threat of cancellation, of the show ending, that threatens to erase him. And he tries to warn people who can't see what he sees, who don't know their characters, who think their reality is the only reality. Rob is Cassandra. He's the prophet nobody listens to. And his tragedy is that he's right about everything, but completely unable to communicate it in a way that others can understand. And the show itself, this is the part that really gets me. The show is aware of this tragedy. It knows what it's doing to Rob. It created him to be a nothing, then damaged him, then gave him the worst possible knowledge. The knowledge that he's a creation with no creator who cares enough to save him. And the show's final act of grace, or cruelty, depending on how you read it, is to have him fall into the void while trying to save everyone else. The reject dies trying to save the world that rejected him. If that's not one of the best villain arcs in modern animation, I don't know what is. Banana-Barbara's paintings function as prophecy within the show, but they also function as storyboards within the metatext. Her paintings predict future episodes. They depict scenes that haven't been animated yet. They show outcomes that the characters haven't experienced. In other words, Banana-Barbara can see the scripts. She has access to information that exists at the production level, not the narrative level. And when her paintings start showing nothing but static, when the future becomes blank, it's because the show was ending. The script stopped. The production stopped. The future of these characters literally ceased to exist because the show was canceled. Barbara's blank paintings are, from a metatextual perspective, the absence of scripts, the absence of story. The void isn't a fictional dimension. It's the white space that exists when a show stops being made. And I know that's a heavy reading for a show where a rainbow-colored cat gets his head stuck in things, but that's the point. That's the iceberg. The surface is comedy. The depths are existential. And both are genuine. Both are intentional. And both are part of what makes this show remarkable. Let me talk about a few more episodes that sit at specific points in the iceberg, because I want to give you a sense of the range of what this show can do. The finale, Season 2's last episode, breaks the show's format in a way that was genuinely shocking when it first aired. The episode addresses the fact that the Wattersons have spent 2 full seasons causing enormous amounts of damage to their town without facing any consequences. Every car crash, every destroyed building, every injury, 2 seasons worth of cartoon chaos is acknowledged. And the citizens of Elmore come together to file a massive class action lawsuit against the family. The episode ends without resolution. The Wattersons are surrounded by an angry mob, and the screen cuts to black. It was the first time the show had a continuity-breaking ending, and it foreshadowed the much more ambitious, serialized elements that would come in later seasons. It's also a commentary on the sitcom reset. The idea that in a traditional sitcom, nothing ever has lasting consequences. The finale asks, what if consequences were real? And the answer is chaos. The Countdown, Season 3, is an episode told almost entirely in real time, following Gumball and Darwin as they try to get to school before the bell rings. The entire episode is structured around a ticking clock, and the escalation from simple lateness to dimension-hopping absurdity happens gradually and convincingly. It's one of the most tightly constructed episodes in the series, and it demonstrates the show's ability to work within extremely restrictive formal constraints while maintaining its characteristic chaos. The World, Season 2, has no protagonist. It's a vignette episode that follows the sentient objects and background elements of Elmore through their daily routines. We see the world from the perspective of a pair of shoes, a piece of bread, a globe. The episode contains no main cast characters. It's pure world building, demonstrating that Elmore has a life beyond what we see through the Wattersons' eyes. And the implied depth, the idea that every object in Elmore has its own consciousness, its own experiences, its own perspective, is staggering if you sit with it. There are thousands of sentient beings in Elmore, and we only see a fraction of their stories. The Console, Season 4, is an entire episode presented as a video game RPG. The animation shifts to a pixel art JRPG style. Characters speak in text boxes. There are turn-based battles, an experience point system, and item management. It's a full commitment to the conceit. The entire 11 minutes exist within the visual language of a 16-bit role-playing game, and it works as both a loving parody of the genre and as an actual story with emotional stakes. The fact that the show can completely change its visual style for an entire episode and make it feel coherent and earned is a testament to the flexibility of the mixed media approach. The Disaster and the Rerun, the two-parter I keep coming back to, deserve special attention, not just for their plot, but for their structure. The Disaster ends on a genuine cliffhanger, with Gumball trapped in the void and the timeline shattered. The Rerun begins by literally rewinding the episode, replaying scenes with slight variations, creating this eerie deja vu quality. The two episodes function as a single story about the nature of time, choice, and narrative itself, and they're as formally ambitious as anything produced by the more celebrated shows of the era. And The Inquisition, the original series finale, is its own iceberg entry because of how controversial it was among fans. When the episode aired on June 24th, 2019, viewers were expecting a resolution to the Void storyline that had been building since Season 3. Instead, they got a cliffhanger. The school's superintendent turns out to be Rob in disguise, trying to turn everyone into live-action humans. The world starts falling apart. Rob falls into the void. The screen fills with static, and then it's over. Credits. No resolution, no explanation, just the end. The fan reaction was intense. Some viewers were angry, some were fascinated. Some interpreted the cliffhanger as a deliberate meta-commentary. The show's world was ending because the show was ending, and the characters couldn't be saved because there were no more episodes in which to save them. Bacalé later confirmed that the cliffhanger was not his choice, that he wanted a resolution, and that it was always intended to be resolved in a movie. The movie was announced. It was delayed. It entered development hell. And for 6 years, Gumball fans existed in a state of suspended anticipation, waiting for an ending that might never come. The arrival of the wonderfully weird world of Gumball in July 2025 changed the equation. The revival series, premiering on Hulu in the US and Cartoon Network internationally, picked up the mythology and promised to resolve the Void storyline. Bacalé returned as executive producer alongside new showrunners Matt Lazell and Eric Fountain. The episode The Rewrite was specifically created to provide the closure that The Inquisition denied. And Rob, the character who fell into the void, was revealed to have been saved and given a new role, owner of the awesome store, the mysterious van of reality-bending artifacts. The fact that it took 6 years and a completely new series to resolve a children's cartoon's cliffhanger tells you something about the cultural impact of Gumball. This isn't a show that people casually enjoy and move on from. It's a show that burrows into your brain, that creates investment in characters and mythologies that persist long after the credits roll. That generates the kind of passionate, analytical, demanding fan base that studios can't manufacture and can't ignore. The revival exists because Gumball's fans wouldn't let the story die, and that's its own kind of escape from the void. Let me also talk about the show's music, because Ben Lockett's compositions are a hugely underappreciated element of the iceberg. Lockett scored the entire series, creating a body of work that spans orchestral, electronic, jazz, rock, and everything in between, often within the same episode. The theme song alone has gone through multiple variations across the show's run, and each version reflects the tonal evolution of the series. But beyond the theme, Lockett's incidental music is phenomenal. He can shift from a sweeping orchestral passage during an emotional scene to a glitchy electronic texture during a void sequence to a punchy comedic sting during a physical gag, and each transition feels natural. The music is doing heavy lifting in establishing tone, and because the show's tone shifts so rapidly, from comedy to horror to emotion to absurdism, sometimes within the same minute, the score has to be incredibly flexible. Lockett's work deserves recognition alongside the great animated series composers, and the fact that it's somewhat overlooked is its own iceberg entry. I want to address one more layer before we wrap up: the show's relationship with its audience. Gumball is, in many ways, a show about watching shows. Its meta-awareness isn't just a comedy device, it's a philosophical framework. The characters inhabit a world that operates according to the rules of television. Events follow narrative logic rather than causal logic. The universe corrects mistakes the way a writer might edit a draft. The void functions like a production's cutting room floor, where discarded ideas and characters go. And the characters, when they become aware of this, as Rob does, as the Shady Man does, are horrified. Because to discover that your reality is a construct designed for someone else's entertainment is, from the inside, indistinguishable from discovering that you don't exist at all. This raises a question that the show never explicitly answers, but that permeates its later seasons. Do the characters of Gumball deserve moral consideration? If they're aware enough to fear erasure, to feel pain, to love each other, to sacrifice themselves, then what is our relationship to them as viewers? Are we complicit in the void? Every time we change the channel, every time we stop watching, are we contributing to the force that erases the things we've decided we no longer need? The show doesn't push this reading, but it's there. It's been there since The Void. And for viewers who sit with it long enough, it transforms the experience of watching the show from entertainment into something more uncomfortable and more profound. And maybe that's the real bottom of the iceberg. Not a fact, not a mystery, but a feeling. Let me also mention the show's legacy. But before we get to the legacy, I want to talk about a layer of the iceberg that sits somewhere between mid-depth and the bottom. And it's about the show's darkest episodes. Because Gumball goes to places that a lot of children's shows wouldn't even consider. And those dark moments are part of what gives the iceberg its depth. The Joy, Season 3, is frequently cited as the scariest episode of the series, and I think that reputation is deserved. The premise: Richard gives Gumball and Darwin a wonder hug that transmits some kind of happiness virus. But this isn't normal happiness. It's wrong. The infected characters develop completely black eyes. They start drooling multicolored slime. They grin with an intensity that's deeply unsettling. And they spread the infection by attack-hugging other people. The episode is presented through the school's security cameras, found footage style. And as the infection spreads through Elmore Junior High, the atmosphere shifts from comedy to genuine body horror. Miss Simeon, the only person who avoids infection, tries to document what's happening, but she can't remember the cure and ultimately succumbs. The final shot is her, infected, grinning into the camera with those black eyes. It's the kind of image that stays with you. And the fact that it aired on a network primarily aimed at children is remarkable. The animation style shifts throughout the episode to become more distorted and corrupted as the infection spreads, with the found footage framing adding a layer of documentary realism that makes the horror more effective. I've rewatched this episode at least 3 times for this video, and it doesn't get less unsettling. The Safety, Season 4, goes in a different direction but is equally dark in its implications. Darwin watches a safety video in health class and becomes obsessed with keeping everyone safe. His obsession escalates from reasonable caution to authoritarian control. He bans violence from cartoons. He replaces all food with pure nutrients. He installs surveillance cameras throughout the Wattersons' house. He chains Gumball to a chair. And eventually, he takes over all of Elmore, creating a totalitarian safety state where freedom has been completely sacrificed in the name of protection. The banner he uses for his regime bears a deliberate resemblance to Nazi symbolism, a detail that the show includes without comment, trusting the audience to recognize the reference. The episode is a condensed, 11-minute exploration of how the desire for safety can become its own form of tyranny. And it's played with enough comedy to remain entertaining for children, while delivering a message about authoritarianism that adults would recognize from real political discourse. Darwin's transformation from caring brother to would-be dictator happens gradually and convincingly. And the episode doesn't shy away from showing how the people around him, his family, Principal Brown, the citizens of Elmore, go along with it, either through brainwashing or through the path of least resistance. It's a story about how people surrender their freedom voluntarily when they're scared enough, and it's told through the medium of a cartoon goldfish who just wants everyone to be safe. The Downer, Season 4, might be the episode that sits deepest in the iceberg's emotional register. Gumball is in an inexplicable bad mood. His family tries to cheer him up. They fail. Gumball wishes they would all disappear, and then they do. Everyone disappears. Elmore becomes empty. And the episode shifts into this eerie, solitary exploration of a world without other people. Gumball wanders through empty streets. He explores abandoned buildings. He talks to himself, and the loneliness becomes oppressive. The photography-based backgrounds, normally populated and alive, become haunting when there's nobody in them. Real buildings, real streets, no people, no cartoon characters, just silence and space. The episode doesn't fully explain what's happening, whether Gumball is dreaming or hallucinating or experiencing something the void is doing to him, and that ambiguity makes it more powerful. It's an episode about depression, told without using the word depression. And the resolution, when Gumball's family returns, isn't triumphant. It's quiet, a return to normal, which is honestly what depression feels like when it lifts. Not a victory, just the absence of the weight. The show has also generated its own creepypasta community. Fan-written horror stories based on the show, the most famous being The Grieving, which imagines a lost episode in which Darwin and Aeneas die, and Gumball takes his own life. These creepypastas are entirely fan-created and have no basis in anything the show actually produced. But their existence tells you something about the iceberg. The show's actual content is dark enough, its world building is rich enough, and its tone is flexible enough that fans can believably imagine it going to genuinely horrific places. You don't get creepypastas about shows that are purely lighthearted. You get them about shows that already have darkness in them. Shows where the horror version feels like a plausible extension of what already exists. The fact that The Grieving and similar stories have circulated widely in the fan community is itself a testament to how effectively Gumball creates an atmosphere where anything feels possible, including the worst things. Let me also talk about Elmore Junior High itself, because the school is its own iceberg entry and an underappreciated element of the show. Bacalé has said that his original pitch for the show was explicitly school-based, about rejected cartoon characters attending a remedial school. The school setting was always central, and when the show was revised into a family sitcom, the school remained a primary location. But the way Gumball uses its school setting is different from most animated school comedies. In most shows, school is a backdrop, a place where characters happen to be. In Gumball, school is an active force. The institution has rules that are absurd, but enforced with bureaucratic rigor. The teachers are, almost without exception, damaged or incompetent. The curriculum is irrelevant. The social hierarchies are arbitrary and cruel. And the show treats all of this with a satirical eye that's aimed at the actual educational system, not just the fictional one. Principal Brown and Miss Simeon's inappropriate romantic relationship is played for comedy, but underneath the laughs is a genuinely uncomfortable depiction of how personal relationships between staff members can compromise an institution's ability to function. The school nurse dispenses terrible medical advice. The counselor, Mr. Small, is a hippie who is more confused about life than his students. The school's physical infrastructure is crumbling, and none of the adults in positions of authority seem to actually care about education. They're all there for their own reasons: comfort, habit, inertia, and the kids are navigating a system that was never designed to serve them. This is satire, real satire, aimed at a real target. And it's delivered so casually, so integrated into the comedy, that many viewers don't consciously register it as commentary, but it's there. And it's consistent across 6 seasons. Elmore Junior High is not a good school. It's not even a functional school. It's an institution that exists to perpetuate itself. And the people inside it, students and staff alike, are shaped by its dysfunctions. The Grades, Season 5, makes this explicit. Gumball fails a test and is moved down to kindergarten. The episode follows his journey through the educational system from the bottom up, and it's a scathing portrait of how schools sort and label children based on arbitrary metrics. The kindergartners are treated as inferior. The older students are treated as if they've earned their position through merit rather than aid, and the whole structure crumbles the moment you examine it. It's an episode about how educational hierarchies create artificial distinctions that have nothing to do with actual learning, and it's delivered with the speed and energy of a comedy chase sequence. The Sonder, from the revival series, takes this even further. Gumball, bored on a bus ride, begins wondering about the inner lives of the people around him. The episode is structured as a series of vignettes, each following a background character through their own complete story. And the cumulative effect is profound. Every person in Elmore has a life as complex and painful and joyful as Gumball's own. The title comes from the actual psychological concept of Sonder, the realization that every person you pass has an inner life as vivid and complex as your own. For a children's show to name an episode after an obscure psychological concept and then execute it with this level of emotional intelligence is, well, it's very Gumball. And I keep thinking about how the show handles failure and imperfection across its entire run, because I think this is the thematic core that connects everything. The void, Rob, the animation style, the family dynamics, the school setting, the meta-awareness. Everything in Gumball is imperfect. The characters are flawed. The world is messy. The animation deliberately looks rough and handmade. The backgrounds are real photographs, complete with their own imperfections, lens distortion, uneven lighting, visible wear. Nothing in the show is polished. Nothing is smooth, and that's the point. The void, the force that erases mistakes, is the enemy precisely because it seeks perfection. It wants to remove anything that doesn't fit, anything that's boring or outdated or unnecessary. It's a curator, an editor, a quality control mechanism that edits out the imperfect elements of reality, and the show positions this as the villain. The force that demands perfection is the force that destroys. The messy, chaotic, imperfect world of Elmore is worth saving precisely because it's messy and chaotic and imperfect. Rob, the character who was deemed a mistake and erased, is ultimately more complex and more interesting than most of the correct characters in the show. Molly, who was erased for being boring, was someone's friend. The early real designs, which were abandoned during development, now exist as in-universe artifacts that give the void its visual texture. Nothing that's discarded is truly worthless. That's the thesis. And the show argues for it not through dialogue or moral speeches, but through the very fabric of its existence, through the animation that combines styles that don't match, through the characters that shouldn't coexist, through the world that makes no logical sense, but makes perfect emotional sense. Let me also talk about the show's broader cultural impact, because it extends beyond its fan base in ways that aren't always acknowledged. Gumball popularized the mixed media animation approach in television. Before Gumball, the idea of combining 2D animation, 3D CGI, live-action photography, puppetry, and stop motion within the same show was largely confined to experimental short films and the occasional feature film like Who Framed Roger Rabbit. After Gumball proved that this approach could work in a weekly television series, and that audiences not only accepted it, but celebrated it, other productions began exploring similar hybrid techniques. The show didn't single-handedly invent mixed media animation, but it demonstrated its commercial and artistic viability at a scale that hadn't been attempted before. The show also influenced the way Cartoon Network approached its European operations. As the first full series produced by Cartoon Network Development Studio Europe, Gumball's success proved that the network's international studios could create content that competed with, and sometimes surpassed, its American productions. This opened the door for other European-produced Cartoon Network shows, and contributed to the network's international expansion strategy. And then, there's the show's influence on internet culture. Gumball became a meme generator. Specific screenshots, facial expressions, and dialogue snippets from the show became widely circulated online, often divorced from their original context. Nicole's rage face, Gumball's various exaggerated expressions, the "I think we all learned something today" format, the "don't have a good day, have a great day" energy. The show's visual density, its willingness to give characters extreme, exaggerated, screenshot-worthy expressions, made it perfectly suited for the meme economy. And unlike some shows that resent being reduced to memes, Gumball leaned into it. The show's social media presence actively engaged with fan-created content, and the meta-awareness of later episodes sometimes referenced the show's own meme status. The show's awards history is another iceberg entry that deserves documentation. Multiple BAFTA Children's Awards for Best Animation, an International Emmy Kids Award, numerous Annie Award nominations for character design, writing, and directing. These aren't just industry trophies. They represent recognition from professional animators and writers who understood the technical and creative achievement that Gumball represented. The Annie Award nominations for character design are particularly noteworthy because the show's character designs are so varied and so rooted in different animation traditions that designing them coherently is an extraordinary challenge. Each character needs to function within their own visual register and within the shared space of Elmore simultaneously. Getting that balance right, episode after episode, for 240 episodes, is a feat of design that deserves more recognition than it typically receives. There are a few more iceberg entries I want to cover before we wrap up, because some of them have been nagging at me throughout this video, and I don't want to leave them out. The Watterson house itself is a recurring visual element that evolves across the series. In the earliest episodes, the house is rendered using real-world photography that's slightly different from later seasons. The lighting is warmer, the angles are more fixed. As the show progressed, the house became more visually dynamic, with camera angles and lighting that shifted to match the tone of each scene. Fans have cataloged the specific real-world locations used for the interior and exterior shots of the house, and the London origins are apparent in certain architectural details. The house also functions as a character in its own right. It has moods, it has history, and in several episodes, it actively participates in the plot. In The Painting, Season 1, the house's state of disrepair becomes a visual metaphor for the family's dysfunction. In The Money, Season 4, the house literally starts falling apart as the family's finances collapse. The relationship between the Wattersons and their house is one of those background details that rewards close attention. The town of Elmore has its own geography that fans have mapped. There's the school, the mall, the Wattersons' neighborhood, the forest, the junkyard, the highway. Each location has its own photographic palette and its own atmosphere. And the show is remarkably consistent about spatial relationships. Characters travel between locations in ways that suggest a coherent town layout, even though the photographs used for backgrounds were taken from different parts of London. This consistency isn't accidental. It requires careful planning and art direction, and it contributes to the sense that Elmore is a real place with real geography, rather than just a collection of arbitrary background. I want to talk about a few more characters from the supporting cast who have their own iceberg entries. Tina Rex is a dinosaur, a full-size Tyrannosaurus Rex who attends Elmore Junior High. She's animated with more weight and dimensionality than the other characters, which makes her physical presence feel genuinely imposing. In early seasons, she's primarily the school bully, but as the show develops, she becomes more nuanced. Her father is even larger and more terrifying than she is, and several episodes hint that her aggressive behavior at school is a reflection of a difficult home life. The show never makes this explicit in a very special episode way. It just provides enough context for attentive viewers to piece together a backstory that's sadder than it initially appears. Larry Needlemeyer is one of the most underappreciated characters in the show. He works every job in Elmore. He's the pizza delivery guy, the gas station attendant, the video store clerk, the convenience store worker. Every service industry job in town is held by the same person. The show uses Larry to comment on the gig economy, on the exploitation of workers who hold multiple jobs to survive, and on the invisibility of service industry employees. In The Laziest, Season 2, Gumball and Darwin try to be lazier than Richard, and the resulting chaos demonstrates how much Elmore depends on the invisible labor of people like Larry. In The Pizza, Season 3, Larry quits all of his jobs simultaneously, and the entire town immediately collapses into anarchy. The episode makes the point with devastating clarity. The infrastructure of civilization depends on the willingness of underpaid workers to keep showing up. Remove that willingness, and everything falls apart. It's a remarkably pointed piece of social commentary for a show aimed at children, and it's delivered through a character who is literally a sentient rock. Tobias Wilson is the jock. He's a rainbow-colored, incredibly vain character who thinks he's much cooler than he actually is. The show uses Tobias to satirize toxic masculinity, social media vanity, and the hollow performance of confidence. He's never presented as genuinely threatening or genuinely cool, just as a person performing a version of coolness that nobody believes except him. And the gap between Tobias's self-image and reality is both the source of his comedy and the core of his pathos. Masami Yoshida is a cloud, literally a small, white cloud, who is the daughter of the richest family in Elmore. The show uses Masami to explore wealth inequality, entitlement, and the way money distorts social relationships. She expects to be treated differently because of her family's wealth. She uses money as leverage in her relationships, and the show never lets her off the hook for it, while also acknowledging that she didn't choose to be born rich, and that her behavior is shaped by an environment she didn't create. It's a nuanced take on class dynamics in a show where one of the characters is literally a sentient cloud. The thing about Gumball's supporting cast that elevates it above most ensemble comedies is that nearly every character functions simultaneously as a comedic archetype and a social commentary. Banana Joe is the class clown, but he's also a comment on the disposability of entertainment figures. Carmen is the overachiever, but she's also a commentary on performative virtue. Idaho is a potato from a farming family, and his fish-out-of-water dynamic at a suburban school comments on rural-urban divide. Every character has a surface function and a deeper resonance, and the show trusts its audience to find the deeper reading without having it spelled out. The show has also influenced the broader landscape of YouTube cartoon analysis. Gumball, alongside shows like Gravity Falls and Adventure Time, was a major driver of the YouTube essay format, where creators produce long-form analysis videos about animated shows. The density of Gumball's world-building, its hidden details, its metatextual layers, and its unresolved mysteries created a rich field for video essayists to explore. Channels dedicated to cartoon analysis found in Gumball a show that rewarded deep examination. There was always something new to find, always a connection that hadn't been made, always a theory that hadn't been proposed. The Void, in particular, became a subject of extensive analysis, with video essays tracking every appearance of static, every reference to the Void's existence, every painting of Banana Barbara, across 6 seasons. The fan analysis community around Gumball is itself part of the iceberg, a layer of interpretation and discussion that extends the show's meaning beyond what its creators explicitly intended. And here's something I've been thinking about throughout this video: the iceberg format. The idea that there are layers of knowledge about a subject, ranging from common knowledge at the surface to obscure trivia at the bottom, is itself a metaphor that Gumball understands intuitively. The show is structured as an iceberg. Its surface, bright colors, silly jokes, physical comedy, is accessible and welcoming. Its depths, existential horror, metatextual commentary, philosophical questioning, are there for anyone willing to look. And the show never forces the depths on viewers who just want the surface. You can watch Gumball at any level and have a complete experience, but if you choose to go deeper, there's always more to find. That's a rare quality in any piece of media. Most shows that have depth lack accessibility. Most shows that are accessible lack depth. Gumball has both, and it achieves both through its fundamental design principle: mixed media. The combination of animation styles isn't just visual, it's philosophical. The show mixes tones the way it mixes media: comedy and horror, slapstick and existentialism, children's entertainment and adult anxiety. Everything coexists, everything belongs, even the things that shouldn't fit. Because in Gumball's world, and maybe in ours, the things that don't fit are the things that matter most. I think about Bakalay's folder. I think about it a lot, actually. A folder of rejected characters, designs that nobody wanted, ideas that didn't make the cut. And I think about how easy it would have been to throw that folder away, to accept the rejections and move on, to start fresh with new ideas that might be more commercially viable, more conventional, more likely to succeed. But he didn't. He kept the folder. He brought it with him when he changed jobs. He looked at those rejected characters and saw not failures, but potential. And when the moment came, when someone said, "Pitch me your show," he opened that folder and said, "Here, these are the ones nobody wanted. Let me show you what they can do." And they did. 240 episodes, 6 seasons, a revival, a movie in development, an international production that spans 3 countries, a visual style that no other show has replicated, characters that started as advertising rejects and became beloved by millions of children and adults around the world, a mythology that explores the very nature of fiction and existence, and a blue cat named Gumball who fails at everything and is loved anyway. The show that started as a folder of rejected character designs is still going. It outlasted the studio that created it. Cartoon Network Development Studio Europe has been restructured and reorganized multiple times since 2007. It outlasted the corporate entity that greenlit it. Turner Broadcasting was absorbed into Warner Media, which was then merged into Warner Brothers Discovery. It survived cancellation, cliffhangers, development limbo, and the general chaos of the modern entertainment industry. And it's still here. Gumball and Darwin are still having adventures. Nicole is still holding the family together. Richard is still being lovably useless. Elmore is still populated by characters that nobody else wanted. And maybe that's the real bottom of the iceberg. Not a fact, not a mystery, but a feeling. The feeling that rejected things, failed ideas, forgotten characters, overlooked concepts can become something extraordinary if someone cares enough to keep them. Bacalé kept his folder. He believed those rejected characters had potential, and he was right. 240 episodes, 6 seasons, multiple awards, a revival, a movie in development. An entire generation of kids and adults who grew up watching a blue cat and a goldfish navigate a world that makes no sense and makes perfect sense at the same time. That's the amazing world of Gumball Iceberg. From the surface, a funny cartoon about a cat, all the way down to the bottom. A show about what it means to exist, to be forgotten, to be deemed a mistake, and to find purpose anyway. But actually, I lied. There's one more layer. Because the deepest part of any iceberg isn't a fact or a theory. It's the experience of going through it. And the experience of going through the Gumball Iceberg is, I think, the experience of discovering that something you thought was simple is actually vast. That a show you watched as a kid, or watched with your kids, or stumbled across channel surfing at 2 in the morning, contains entire worlds of meaning underneath its surface. I want to close by talking about the relationship between Gumball and Darwin, because it's the emotional foundation of the entire show, and it's the thing that makes everything else, the void, the meta-awareness, the animation, the satire, land with the weight that it does. Gumball and Darwin are not just brothers. They're not just best friends. They're two halves of a single relationship that serves as the show's moral center. Gumball is selfish, loud, impulsive, and frequently wrong. Darwin is kind, thoughtful, sensitive, and frequently ignored. Together, they balance each other. Gumball gives Darwin courage. Darwin gives Gumball conscience. And the show never takes their relationship for granted. It tests it. It strains it. It puts them on opposite sides of arguments. It lets them hurt each other. And then it brings them back together. Not through grand gestures or dramatic reconciliations, but through the simple, stubborn fact that they love each other. Every time. Without condition. Without reservation. Even when they're angry. Even when they disagree. Even when one of them has done something genuinely stupid. The Origins, the 2-part episode about how Darwin joined the family, is the purest expression of this. Darwin literally walked across the country to get back to Gumball. He grew legs. He survived the sewer. He endured hardships that would break an adult, let alone a goldfish. And he did it because the bond between him and Gumball was stronger than biology, stronger than logic, stronger than the physical limitations of his species. That's the show's thesis about love. It's not rational. It's not practical. It doesn't make sense, but it's real. And it's the only thing that matters. And here's the thing about Gumball and Darwin's relationship that connects all the way back to the iceberg. The void erases things that are deemed mistakes. It removes the boring, the purposeless, the redundant. But it can't erase the love between these two characters. Rob was erased because he had no purpose. Molly was erased because she was boring. But Gumball and Darwin persist. They endure. Through 6 seasons, and a revival, and a movie in development, and a mythology about the end of their world, they endure. Because their relationship gives them purpose. It makes them interesting. It protects them from the void, in the same way that Bacalé's affection for his rejected characters protected them from the metaphorical void of the advertising industry's recycle bin. Love is the opposite of the void. That's what the show is saying. Underneath everything, the void erases. Love preserves. The void forgets. Love remembers. The void demands perfection. Love accepts imperfection. And in a world where the forces of erasure are constantly at work, where characters disappear, where memories are wiped, where reality itself can be unraveled by a universal remote, the thing that holds it all together is 2 brothers who refuse to let go of each other. I think about that when I watch the show now. I think about it when Gumball does something stupid and Darwin sighs but stays. I think about it when Darwin is in danger and Gumball panics in a way that's obviously sincere. I think about it when they sit on the couch together, watching television, existing in the same space, not doing anything important, just being together. Those moments are the show's quiet center, the still point in the chaos, and they're what make the chaos worth enduring. Let me also talk about the sibling dynamic with Anais, because she completes the picture in ways that are easy to overlook. Anais Watterson is 4 years old and the smartest person in the family. She's smarter than her brothers, smarter than her parents, smarter than most of the adults in Elmore. And the show uses her intelligence not as a superpower, but as a burden. Aeneas knows things. She understands things. She can see the solutions to problems that everyone else misses. But she's 4. Nobody listens to her. Her brothers dismiss her. Her parents overlook her. The world treats her as a child, despite the fact that she's more capable than most of the adults in it. And the frustration of being smart in a world that doesn't value intelligence, the loneliness of seeing clearly when everyone around you is confused, is a real emotion that the show captures with specificity and empathy. In The Pest, Season 5, Aeneas is being bullied, and Gumball and Darwin try to help. The episode reveals that the bully's behavior stems from jealousy of Aeneas' intelligence, and the resolution involves Aeneas standing up for herself rather than being rescued by her brothers. It's a statement about agency, about the right of even the smallest and most overlooked characters to solve their own problems. And it's also a commentary on how the smart kid often becomes the target, how intelligence in childhood can be isolating rather than empowering. Aeneas navigates this with a composure that belies her age, and the show respects her enough to let her be both brilliant and vulnerable without reducing her to either trait. The 3 Watterson siblings, Gumball, Darwin, and Aeneas, represent 3 different ways of being in the world. Gumball charges forward without thinking. Darwin follows his heart. Aeneas follows her mind. And none of them is complete without the others. Gumball without Darwin is reckless and aimless. Darwin without Gumball is passive and overlooked. Aeneas without her brothers is lonely and disconnected. Together, they form something whole, something messy and loud, and frequently catastrophic, but whole. And the show argues, consistently, that wholeness, the kind that comes from imperfect people, committing to each other despite their imperfections, is the most important thing there is. I've been going for a while now, and if you're still here, I want to say thank you, genuinely. This is the kind of deep dive that I love doing. And the fact that someone is on the other end, listening, whether you're awake or drifting off, means a lot to me. Gumball is a show that rewards attention. It rewards rewatching. It rewards the kind of obsessive, detailed, analytical engagement that the Iceberg format demands. And I hope this video has given you at least one thing you didn't know before, one connection you hadn't made, one detail you'd missed, one reason to go back and watch an episode you haven't thought about in years. And if that sounds like a lot for a kids show, well, that's the point. It's always been more than it looks. The surface is never the whole story. There's always more underneath. That's what makes it amazing. Good night, everyone. Sleep well. And if you can't sleep, well, that's what the next video is for.